You need to wake up to this. Victor David Hanson just made the loudest call to Americans to realize what Biden's America has become in a mere 3 years as an onslaught of illegal mass immigration, coupled with a crumbling infrastructure and the government's affinity for executive power, starts cutting at the knee of the foundations of this country. I felt like this conversation he had earlier this month on GB News was even more free-flowing than we usually see him, because Victor in the last few years has refused to pull a punch simply over the fear of getting canceled. Subscribe to the channel for more content like this, and watch this next clip to know exactly what I'm talking about.
Now they feel that they bypass the legislative process, and by fiat and executive orders, they get everything they want, from green policies, DEI, transgender in the military. So this is really weird, this last 10 years, how the left has gravitated to using non-elected power in the United States to implement all of their agendas did not come from the legislative process. Whether it's amnesty for illegal aliens or student loan debt or destroying the border, these have all been processes in the Congress, and they weren't. They were administrative state agency directives from the president. One of the positive things is that when you talk about a managerial class at technocracy in the European sense, they get their legitimacy from these universities. There's only about 9 or 10 of them: Harvard, Princeton, Yale, Stanford, Berkeley. And what you're seeing now, it's kind of a scab that's been pulled off with the anti-Semitism, the Middle East, these protests. And you're starting to, the public is starting to look at things. They said, oh my God, they took away the SAT for 4 years. Stanford only let in 9% of their 2,100 entering class the last 3.5 years were white males. And we're looking at all these, the types of Alvin Bragg or Fannie Willis or Judge Merchan or all of these, or Anthony Fauci or Mayorkas. And we look at all these people and they're not very well educated and they don't know very much. And so we think, but why are they prestigious when they have this cursus honorum?
Good question, isn't it? Did you know that the majority funder for research work at some of America's highest ranked colleges and universities is actually the federal government? For example, in 2021, more than 55% of the R&D budget for America's top universities compromises government grants, and there's also federal funding that happens for student aid programs and institutional support. So what do they get in return? Considering just how much damage the education system has taken at large, it's not hard to see why Victor Davis would connect the thread from a broken education system to a brewing technocracy in America that seems to love executive power. And as you can imagine, every power needs to draw some legitimacy from somewhere, and making the education system of the country a vehicle to do that seems to be the theme they're running with. And the most glaring example of that connecting thread was seen barely a couple months into the Biden presidency when he signaled an executive order to rejoin the Paris climate change agreement in 2021. It was a move that bypassed Congress debate and approval and research work from the educational system that was as cover in order to do that. Biden was criticized heavily for that executive overreach and was almost unbecoming of a Democratic leader. Since then, Biden has an average around 40 executive orders per year, ranging from trans issues to oil pipelines, all of which deserve to be debated on the platform of the parties in the Congress, rather than signed into law unilaterally by the president.
One of the reasons that you see this left hysteria among the managerial classes that we just talked about concerning Trump is he hasn't been subtle about what he wants to do to higher education. I mean, some of the things, if he were to win the Senate, would be mind-boggling. He would go to Harvard $60 billion in tax endowment. And that might mean another $2 billion. And if the way these universities work, their endowments are locked up in long-term investments, and they usually depend on their $3 to $8 billion budgets on annual giving. Well, that's going down now because of what they're doing. And if you were to tax them, they would really be in trouble. The second thing he wants, that the people around him is getting out of the $1.7 trillion student loan business and making these elite universities pledge their own endowment against the loans that they offer. And then you would not see a much DEI, because we know one thing: they're very greedy, grasping institutions, and the faculty and the administrators protect themselves. And the idea they're going to let a bunch of kids take gender studies and DEI classes that default on the loans, and it will come out of their operating budget, and they won't tolerate that. And then he's even talked about an exit test. Everybody, if they have to take an SAT to get in, why not take one to get out? So that paranoia and deportation are the two issues. Everybody says he's going to war on the universities. It's a very another Orwellian. We let in 10 million people. We destroyed the border, and they're all broke the law. They're all here illegally. But Donald Trump wants to deport them. Can you imagine that? It's going to be like the partition between India and Pakistan, or that's what they talk about. We're going to have mass expulsions. They're going to come in to your home and they're going to ask for an ID to everybody. And this is what they're doing now.
It's unfortunate, but it may be true at this point that most of the academia may be falling prey to the same political maneuvering that the mainstream media has been for a long time. And when that happens, people will start to lose trust in what the academics churn out as much as they distrust what the host and pundits say on television. And all of that is bound to happen when there are political tentacles spread into academia, supposedly in hopes to help it along. But we've seen time and time again how badly these collaborations end because governments, by their nature, are prone to temptation and need to look for legitimacy wherever they can find it. That's partly what explains Donald Trump's opposition to a massive educational bureaucracy tied to the government and therefore his plans to end the Department of Education in his second term. It remains to be seen how this turns out, but understanding that connecting thread between the modern government and academia is the first step toward delinking it. And what's sad is that it is only the start of many things that the government will need to get out of, including manipulation and artificial expansion of money, people's private lives, and putting their thumb on the scale when it comes to the modern culture wars.
It's the same theme that what destroyed Rome was destruction of the currency, entitlements to people who were not productive, a huge slave class, the destruction of the middle class, and an inability to assimilate, intermarry, and integrate millions of people who were pouring in that wanted the benefits of clean water, prosperity, the rule of law, but they didn't contribute to it, they were antithetical to it, and that finally just fragmented it. And so I am worried about that because I live in a community that's 85% Hispanic, and it has about 40% of the people are so-called undocumented or illegal. And when you see people on your own, where I live was kind of like it's a different climate, but it was like a British village of the 1930s. Nobody had a key for their farmhouse. They were all little small, very well-kept small farms. Everybody knew each other. Everybody had baseball, little league, everything. And now it's latifundia. These huge corporate farms came in, bought the land, took the old farmhouses and rented them out to illegal aliens who then brought in 30 or 40 people. And a quarter mile from here, there was the old farmhouse. I used to visit the farmer and his wife and their kids. They were friends of mine. And now there must be 10 shacks that are around it with no cesspools, just porta potties that they pump out once in a while. They have Romex wires strung, and there's dogs, chickens, horses, all in violation of every zoning, health law. And there's trafficking, there's drugs, and I have to be careful whether I say it. We've had Fox News came out here and did a documentary on it near my house. So it's very much like Rome. And the medicine would be, in California, the Californians have decided the medicine is worse than the disease.
This same collusion between a government overreach and the stifles of free speech in Congress or in academia can be factored in as reason for rampant border crisis. No one can claim that the government doesn't possess the right tools or the power needed to clean up the mess it's created with mass illegal immigration, and yet the true crisis is one of will and acknowledgement of how terribly wrong the crisis is turning out to be if more than 11 million illegal migrants have made it inside just under the Joe Biden presidency, and it also goes back to the trust deficit it creates that we spoke about earlier. Over a period of time, the people start to speculate if the government really is on their side after all, or if there's some more ulterior motive or some shadowy interest group that is serving instead. Watch Victor Davis describe what has become of his hometown and how that trust deficit is leading to the erosion of vital logistical infrastructure in the cities.
I would say 25% of the California market is a black market, and it's run by DEI people, immigrants, and they have huge swap meets If I get in my car, I could drive in 10 minutes and buy a shovel, a mattress, food, flowers, anything on a road corner, and I would never pay sales tax, and they don't pay income tax on it. I can get any type of food I want from a canteen. These people that live out here, that's the beginning of the problem. What do you do with their trash? If I don't put my trash and separate it out here in the country for the trash removal company, I'm in big trouble. But they just hire local people to go dump it in vineyards and orchards all around. So I get up every Sunday morning and I come out, I can see oil cans, tires, paint, wet diapers, drugs, and I have to pick it up. And it's all Spanish literature. Never their address where you can trace them, but their mail, junk mail and everything. And yet, if I write about that, and I have, Microsoft just said my website was a malicious website.
Someone like Victor Davis Hanson can say that out loud because he doesn't have much to lose at this stage of life. And that means it's vital that you pay attention. As America almost goes through the eye of a needle with this next election, many people have to make up their minds about where the country ought to go. Tell me in the comments if that's something that you feel as well. I think increasingly, if that doesn't happen, the choice will be made for you simply by the dire circumstances enveloping the world, and they will probably require a price that we shouldn't have to pay.